Always good, man, to talk football. Always great. And Badger fans have had this one circled for a long, long time. So getting Bama into Camp Randall, that's a unique experience for any college football fan. So we're excited for it for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun seeing the Alabama Wisconsin home and home series. I'm really hoping the SEC doesn't take off the 2025 game because like if they do, I'm gonna have a hissy fit.
No, we'll be okay if that one goes away. Let's just do this one this year.
True. I mean, I'm excited about being on Big Noon Kickoff. That's gonna be fun. I mean, I know like some of the people that still have Direct TV in 2024, they're gonna be like, "Thank God it's not on ESPN or ABC."
I'll say this: the big nude kickoff will be fun. It'll be a spotlight. But anytime I've made the analogy before, if you have a house and you're hosting someone that's really important, listen, Alabama is super important in the ecology of college football. You want to put your best foot forward, and in that sense, it's a shame it's not a night game. Like Camp Randall at night, much like a lot of places at night, it just hits different. So Badger fans, we were a little disappointed we couldn't get y'all under the lights. But
Yeah.
again, beggars can't be choosers. This is an incredible opportunity for Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun seeing Gus Johnson call an Alabama game because like it was pretty fun seeing it in 2022 and get to see it again. But I can't help but feel like Wisconsin saved a little bit of the energy for Alabama because I mean I'll be real, everybody's gonna bring their A game for Alabama, and y'all have USC after your bye week, so I mean you got a little bit of the big game saved, and there's some people that are like, oh well, y'all are sloppy, you're gonna look awful against Alabama. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that because I've seen some of that way too many times. I mean, y'all came back against Western Michigan, and you had a good victory against South Dakota. What's been your synopsis for the 2024 season thus far?
Uh, Inconsistent. I don't know. I don't know if very few teams I think ever live up to the spring and fall hype of fan bases. Like every fan base comes into every year thinking every player's in the best shape of their lives, every scheme is going to work, every transfer we brought in. Like I don't think we've quite hit on all cylinders, but Wisconsin's 2-0. And I think one of the things we've looked around when you look around college football, and you saw some of that last week with Bama and South Florida, there's a lot of early season struggles for we saw with Notre Dame losing, we saw it with Oregon for 2 weeks, we saw Florida State, we saw Bama. And I think maybe at times Wisconsin fans have taken a little too much out of winning two games comfortably. They've won by 14 each one. They could have won by 21 last week. Not great competition, but I think there's always the first couple of weeks a bit of working new pieces in. There's no preseason in college football. So I think it's been a little inconsistent, but I think a lot of Badger fans also think there's an element of playing down to your competition a little bit and then playing up to your level of competition this weekend for Bama. So I think we expect, or at least I do, I'll speak for myself. I expect a better, sharper version of the Badgers this week hosting Alabama because I think it just has to be.
Ryan, let me ask you how was the transfer portal for y'all? I got a lot of new players because sometimes that continuity. I mean, when you're constantly every year on new players, and it's a different dynamic. But how are y'all on transfers?
Yeah, you hit on it. Every year, it kind of changes the culture of the team. They reloaded the linebacker room dramatically from last year. They thought they needed a lot more speed there. They went into SEC country, pulled Jaheim Thomas from Arkansas. So they have reloaded athletically there. It's been a little hit or miss. And I think some of that is, again, it takes a little while to fit all these new pieces into your team, right? I think that's what sometimes fans forget is there's culture, there's scheme, and it takes a little while to gel. For the second year in a row, they've gone into the transfer portal for a quarterback. Last year was Tanner Mordecai, SMU. This year it's Tyler Van Dyke, Miami. Very interesting with Tyler Van Dyke. You know, the rap on him coming from Miami is big armed quarterback. He's going to really throw the ball downfield. You're going to get some big shock plays, but you're also going to get some really bad interceptions. So far, we've had like the inverse of that. It's been a lot of shorter passes, but he hasn't thrown picks. We're still trying to figure out like, where is this big armed guy that's going to throw deep touchdowns, but also some picks? That hasn't happened. I would say portal's been inconsistent. The Badgers did, it looks like, hit on a defensive lineman. He's got 2 sacks this year, Elijah Hills. They pulled him out of the FCS level. He's really been the most disruptive guy in the front seven. Anytime you can hit on a defensive lineman in the portal, I mean, that's like finding the gold at the end of the rainbow. So it's been a little hit or miss, but I think they did upgrade the talent and the depth on the defensive side. And then Tyler Van Dyke is the quarterback they got from the portal. And that one's still a little up in the air.
You know, and people don't realize when these guys are transferring in, some of them transfer in May, but transferring in, January. And now all of a sudden you have to learn a totally new offense. You got to learn the calls, and then you got to develop a rhythm with your receivers. When you've had them there 2 or 3 years, you kind of know where to throw the ball. You kind of know what location, what their hands, things like that. But now, I mean, it's a struggle. And I think fans, and you see it with a lot of fans, even now all around the country with Dabo and stuff like that, really not very patient. They feel like it's supposed to, just seamlessly happen. And I mean, that's why you need to schedule, like we did South Florida. I mean, some of these opening up, first game, and then you have all these transfers. I mean, I think that'll start to change a little bit. These big, I know everybody used to want them and stuff like that, but I mean, that's when you had your players for 3 or 4 years. But then now it's hit or miss at first game.
Yeah. And Luke Fickell's talked about that too, about the portal's great, right? Use it to augment. You have to build through recruiting. You have to build through high school kids, because you put, to your point, exactly, you put them in your culture, and then you know exactly what they are as you develop them. So yeah, I think the portal, there's a lot of false hope in the portal. Not that you can't find great players, obviously, because we've seen it, but you have to build through high school ranks, and you have to build through culture, and that comes from recruiting and developing.
Yeah, and we saw with South Florida. I mean, they had 15 on each side of the ball. They had 15 graduate transfers, senior, redshirt seniors. The youngest player on the team was a quarterback. He's a sophomore. He was 6'3", 225. I mean, he was a beast to tackle. But it's hit or miss. But I mean, a lot of these schools being so impatient think it's just going all of a sudden just a seamless flow. It's in some places it's a nightmare. So you get what you get what the NCAA sets it up as. This is the new dynamic.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though, is like I've noticed that some people have gotten real impatient with Luke Fickell. They're like, "Oh, it's not going to work out." It's like I think they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Honestly, it's his second year, not his fifth year. I mean, these things take time.
Yeah, and he's old school. I mean, he played and grew up. Generation where you had your players for 3-4 years, and then if you had a transfer, you had to sit out. Now they immediately play. And so it's a new dynamic for all of these coaches, and it's got to be frustrating. I know it's got to be frustrating for them. I mean, you do not know what you're going to get. Even summer, you don't have the pads on. You don't. You do not know. It's so unsettled. I mean, it'll settle in toward the end of the season. That's why nobody's going undefeated this year.
No, and there are some. I think there's frustrations a little bit with Badger fans, but I think most of it is not directed towards Luke Fickell. I think most people understand he took over a program that was towards the end of the Paul Chryst tenure. And I'll never say a bad thing about Paul Chryst. He won a ton of games for the Badgers, but it was starting to there were more cracks in the foundation than people realized. I think is maybe the best way to say it. And Luke Fickell coming in, he's had to rebuild not just the second story bedroom and add a toilet and a shower. He's had to rebuild some of that foundation, like the defensive line. And I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit for Wisconsin. It's kind of barren. And that when you look back at the really good Wisconsin teams throughout the 2010 to 2020s, there was never an Ohio State defensive line. It was never an Alabama defensive line, but there were NFL guys on those defensive lines. Keanu Benton for the Steelers. Henningsen was a guy. Loudermilk plays for the Steelers. And they just don't have that. And that doesn't just change overnight. Like if you don't have a good defensive line, there's not really a way to scheme around that. And so it's some of that rebuilding foundation for Luke Fickell. I think most Badger fans still believe in the resume there. You're talking about a guy who brought Cincinnati to the playoffs, a guy who grew up in the Midwest, played at Ohio State, like understands winning culture, was a championship level high school wrestler, right? Like I say that because those dudes are just kind of tough. They have the right type of mentality to coach football. So I think it's taking a little more time than Badger fans thought, but I think Badger fans probably had their expectations a little too high out of the gates. And Johnny, that speaks to a little bit of what you were saying earlier with expectations of fans and myself too. Like I'm a fan as well, so I fall into that boat.
So everybody, you said not too many happy about the 11 o'clock kickoff.
No, man, Badger. First, it's a long time, like standing thing with Badger fans. Like we don't always fill up the stadium quite as quickly as we would hope, and partially because those 11 a.m. kickoffs, man. Badger fans, they like to tailgate, they like to pregate, they like to enjoy the morning. And then there's some issues getting into Camp Randall that I'm not going to belabor on this show. Badger fans will know that. But yeah, a night game at Camp Randall. And listen, much like a night game in Tuscaloosa or a nice night game in Death Valley, like those just hit a certain way. And again, when you have a national spotlight, which you do when Bama comes into town, right? You have a national spotlight for a game like this. It's much like, as I mentioned, showing your house. You want to show off the best aspect of it. And the best aspect of Madison is a night game. But listen,
you ever have a whiteout?
No, we don't do whiteouts, but we'll stripe it. Sometimes we'll do red and white. So we will stripe it sometimes. But it is just unbelievable at night. Especially if it's a good atmosphere, jump around third quarter, the fans are singing. There's some vulgarities in the student section that, again, on a family show we won't speak to, but it's next level at night.
Well, and
does anybody know who the commentators are? Who are the commentators for this game? Does anybody know? I forgot to look.
Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt for Alabama, Wisconsin.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just waiting to hear, oh, touchdown.
Gus will bring it.
Oh yeah. That's why I love watching like a game on Fox for sure. Matthew Anderson, thank you for tuning in to today's edition of Crimson Tide Live at Alabama with the Voice of College Football. He says Camp Randall is awesome at night. Should have been a night game. He agrees with that sentiment that it should have been a night game.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Me personally, I don't care what time it is. Like, you just tell me the time and I'll make sure to watch it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of those 11 a.m. kickoffs. Not a big fan. Even when I played, I wasn't a big fan of some of that. I always liked the traditional, the night games.
Yeah.
You always hated the 2:30 in the South. You did not want that 2:30 kickoff. I mean, muggy, miserable. And then the worst was if you had a pop-up shower right before the game, and you go in the locker room and you come out, and then the steam's coming off the grass. Y'all still grass up there?
Yeah. Well, they redid the stadium actually, so it's not grass. So they redid the stadium, so they're able to put heating elements underneath it. In anticipation of, obviously now there's 12-team playoff, you're able to host a playoff game. Well, y'all don't have this issue. You have pop-up showers, but you don't have to worry about having a heating element under your stadium in case it's a playoff game. So they are trying to get ahead of the game there. And so the field it's still getting broken in. It's a brand new one. They just redid it this offseason.
Yeah. So it's a synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the little pellets and all that kind of crazy stuff. Oh gosh, let me tell you this. We played at Southern Illinois one time, and they had the old AstroTurf. And you know what they softened the turf with? Sand.
No.
Sand. And then when you talking about scraping and friction on those elbows, it was awful.
It's gonna be painful.
Oh yeah, patted it with sand. That would eat you alive.
And now I'd like to discuss a little bit about the series history. Now, we've only played each other twice, once in 2015 at the Jerry Dome, and in 1928 on November 15th in the Wallace Wade era, where Wisconsin won 15-0. And like the late end of the 20s, while it wasn't a great depression for everybody, a lot of us in Tuscaloosa kind of considered that a great depression for us, because it's like we weren't like in the Rose Bowl for those 3 years at that time. But it's great to see Alabama, Wisconsin having that home and home. And what
2015? Didn't we go to Wisconsin?
No, we went to the Jerry Dome. We didn't have a home.
That's right. Was that one of those early season?
Yes, it was week 1 on ABC. Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit were calling that game.
Yeah.
We were excited about that one too, and then the game started. Funny thing, that was actually Wisconsin, if I remember correctly, played pretty close. And there's a term, if crock potting. I don't know if you ever watched the Solid Verbal College Football podcast, but they have a term for basically I think invented it for Alabama essentially, where Bama would just crock pot teams, where you just kind of slowly cook them to death. And it felt like that was a crock pot game for Wisconsin. They hung around, but it felt like they certainly shouldn't be. And at the end of it, I think Bama won by 21 or something. Just too physical, too good.
Well, we won 35. We won 35-17 to start things off for the Paul Chryst era for Wisconsin. It was funny though, where it was like Gary Anderson left for Oregon State. Like it was like, I know there was like a running joke about Wisconsin being cheap and all that, but that's changed quite a lot since.
Yeah, Wisconsin is. It's tough because you guys are blue. Like I said, you guys, but Bama is a blue blood, and Wisconsin is always just in that tier right below, right? Wherever those tier lines mark up. But I always tell Badger fans, because Badger fans, it's so easy as a fan, and this is true in life too. You always kind of look at your neighbor that has a little bit more or whatever, keeping up with the Joneses. And Badger fans are always looking up at, to some degree, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, the Bamas, the Notre Dames. Wisconsin is much more of a have than have not in college football. Like the ability to go hire a Luke Fickell, like that's a coach that could have gone to a lot of places. You know, Wisconsin's NIL program has been pretty good. They're reinvesting right now in a really nice practice stadium facility upgrade. They just redid the field. Wisconsin can compete just about everywhere outside of that very top tier. So yeah, I always tell Badger fans, we're much more of a have than a have not. Don't stress it too much. That being said, you're never going to be a Bama. You're never going to have the support of a Georgia or an Ohio State or Notre Dame. But if you can land the right quarterback, you can still jump up and bite any of those teams. And I think that's what it all comes down to. Can you find that right quarterback? Because they've actually done a pretty good job of reinvesting in the other areas of the program.
Yeah. I've always known, Wisconsin as being, big up front with the offensive line. Then you had Ron Dane and very, very, very physical, type players and stuff like that. And a lot of offensive linemen going into the, the NFL and having great success. And so I figure they'll line up and they'll try to, establish a little, something up front, little strategy up front, get real physical, make it a real physical, tight game.
And they still in this game have that veteran offensive line, pretty big offensive line. They have shifted a little bit. Phil Longo came in with coach, or Phil Longo came in with Fickell, and it plays more of an air raid, more of a power spread, somewhere in between the two of those. So we spread it out a little bit more. But Longo still wants to run the ball a lot. We ran the ball a lot in the first 2 weeks. So that part of Wisconsin offense, regardless of what formation we run it out of, is never, in my opinion, going to go away. There's always going to be some physicality up front. There's always going to be some running backs. So yeah, you're still going to see that. How successful it'll be, that's definitely something we can talk about and get into, because that's going to be a big key to the game on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Well, and I've always heard about Wisconsin being running back you. There's two schools I always think of in college football that are running back you: Georgia and Wisconsin. Is Wisconsin still running back you, especially in 2024? And who is that running back that we need to look out for?
Running back you. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to argue with the lineage of Wisconsin as running back you since early 90s, right? You look at the guys they've churned out, multiple Doak Walker winners. And quite frankly, some of the guys at Wisconsin, if they had gone to Bama, would have won a Heisman. I have no doubt about that, just because certain schools get a little more prestige. No doubt about it. Are they running back you now? I don't know. Like, they haven't had an elite guy in a while. It's a really deep running back room. This is one of the deeper running back rooms Wisconsin has had in a while. But it's not an elite room. There's not a star there. You're going to see Ches Malusi get quite a few carries. Malusi was a Clemson transfer. He's had several injuries. Solid starter, but he hasn't run very efficiently this year. He's at 3.83 yards per carry. It's been a little bit of a struggle for him. The guys behind him have actually been a little more productive. So you're going to see a running back rotation. It's going to be Tyree Walker if he's healthy. Johnny, speak to your earlier point, that's a guy that got out of the portal, big physical running back. And then underneath him, Cade Yakimelli has really been, and Matthew Anderson nails it here, Yak. He's really been a revelation to some degree for Wisconsin through the first 2 games. He's looked the best. He's looked more explosive, kind of a bigger back, slashing runner, good speed, not a ton of agility in space, he's not going to make a lot of people miss, but when he sees a hole, he hits it really quickly north and south. So you're going to see Cade Yakimelli. And then they have 2 freshmen, both 4-star guys. Wisconsin's really high on both of them. They both played last weekend. I don't know how much you're going to realistically see them in week 3. The future is bright for them. You're probably going to see mostly a Tyree, Ches Walker, and then Cade Yakimelli trio.
Well, Ryan, I was going to tell you this. Alabama, what you're going to see with Alabama, you're going to see some speed. some physicality, but a lot of inconsistency right now. I don't know with regard to Wisconsin, but a lot of penalties, a lot of turnovers. But I mean, it's something that can be fixed, and it will be. I don't know if it'll happen this week and they'll start piecing it and putting it all together, but they'll usually Alabama, as the season rolls along, they'll start, tightening the ship and cut down the number of people that are rotations and number of players that are in and out and that kind of stuff. Running backs are going to be good. Those two guys they're like they're like ping pong balls. They'll bounce around, good low to the ground with their gravity, good feet, quick feet. Kind of a Mark Ingram. Remember old Mark? He had really good balance in his legs. You're going to see a lot of that. You got a little Ryan Williams, a little 17-year-old out there. He's got some good speed.
Hollywood.
Good speed. They got to do a better job getting him open. But right now, I need to see for them. I need to see the tight end more, and they absolutely do not use tight end. If it is, it's for blocking. But last week, I don't know if you heard, we were South Florida was just blowing linebackers through the A gaps and come. I mean, they were bringing 5, 6, 7, and then we're throwing nothing behind them. Replace the linebackers when they, we had no hot routes underneath. I don't even know if we even threw the tight end. But I mean, you've got to have somebody going through the middle of that field and just occupying those linebackers. But we did none of that. So we got a little I don't know, strategize and have to really rethink that. I think we really need to start attacking the middle of the field, run some post routes through there, and just everything seems to be on the edge and just not enough underneath to, for those linebackers to be occupied. They're just thinking, run, and that kind of stuff. And then when they, sometimes we'll hit it, those two little running backs, they'll skedaddle through there, and they'll pop it out of there. But just a lot of inconsistency, but a lot of talent, a lot of speed. So we'll see what happens.
I think you should wait till week 4 to start attacking the middle of the field. Give it one more week.
Oh, yeah. We need one of those like George, one of those Brock Bowers, and nobody could cover that guy.
No, he was. I mean,
he was big in the middle, great hands. He could run on the outside, and if we had somebody like that, but yeah, we need to get something through the middle of the field. Now we'll Georgia. That one will be a challenge for us, but it's also going to be a challenge for them because they'll be one of those lying in wait. Alabama will really bring something for Georgia, so that'll want to be interesting. But I hope we'll do a little. I don't know, start to figure out some things on offense.
Well, I was watching, just kind of getting ready for this game this week, watching some of the running backs. Miller is really impressive. Jam Miller, really impressive. North south, like you said, good balance. And that's really been, and I would kick this back to you, that's really been a big question mark for Wisconsin is the rush defense. They've struggled at times. Both Western Michigan and South Dakota, which are not Alabama, have been able at times to gash Wisconsin in the running game between the tackles. I question, will Alabama and Coach DeBoer and this offense with some of those receivers, with Milroe, will they just be patient and just run the ball if they don't need to ever throw it? Will they stick to that?
I don't know. They do very little RPOs. Usually it's a call pass, it's a call run. There's not a lot of optioning going on with regard to that. But I agree with what you're saying. They'll have to figure it out now. They'll have to figure it out real soon. What is the style? What are we going to bring? Are we going to be a power run it straight in your face? We're going to do some RPOs, we're going to do some little option, things like that. We don't trap very much. We don't do a lot of pulling, the guards and tackles and trapping and all of that. It's just either, throw it or just, run it and that kind of stuff. But need to get a little more dynamic in there. Make the defense think a little more.
Yeah.